This is Kerry W. Thornley, who is the author of The Idle Warriors, a book just published by Illuminate Press in Georgia, but a book that was written in 1962 and has Lee Harvey Oswald as a main character.
1961.
1961.
Yeah.
61. Well, Kerry, can you tell me then a little bit about the origins of the book and your acquaintance with Oswald?
I was in the Marines with Oswald at a subsidiary of El Toro Marine Base in California. He had just been overseas. He'd just been to Japan. And I wound up going overseas and wound up stationed in the same outfit that he'd been in when he was over there. And I'd been there, I arrived in July, and that autumn I read in the papers that he had gone into the American Embassy in Moscow and plopped down his passport and had attempted to renounce his American citizenship. And that came as a surprise to me, because even though he claims that he was a communist, it was always seemed tongue-in-cheek to me. It didn't seem to me like he was very serious about it. And so I got to thinking about it, and I decided, and I was getting disillusioned with the United States myself at the time. Not very long afterwards, that next spring, the U-2 incident occurred, and Dwight David Eisenhower was actually caught lying about something which just seemed inconceivable to me up until then.
Sir, was this 1959, Kerry?
It was 1959 that Oswald attempted to defect or defected or whatever it is that he actually was doing. And I believe the U-2 incident was probably in May of 1960, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Anyway, so as my tour of duty over there continued, I more and more began to feel like I understood why he defected to the Soviet Union, which I didn't. Everything I've read since then has convinced me that I didn't know what I was talking about, that I was projecting my own feelings and experiences into him. But so I decided I was going to write a novel about being in the Marines anyway, because I'd wanted to be a novelist, and being in the Marines was the first exciting thing that ever happened to me. And so I decided to make my main character defect to the Soviet Union in the last chapter. When I got back to the States, I made a lot of notes for the novel when I was overseas, but none of them ever found their way into the final draft. I started working on it when I got back to California, wrote the first 5 chapters in California, and then my friend Greg Hill and I went down to New Orleans and lived in the French Quarter, and that's when I wrote the rest of it. And we arrived there in February of 1961. And I got a part-time job and spent much of that summer working on the book, and then finally wrote the last chapter sometime in, I think it was probably late in 61.
And you never heard Lee Oswald's name in New Orleans, or knew of people that knew him in New Orleans?
Hello? You there?
Yes, in New Orleans, you never heard Lee Oswald's name again.
That's weird.
Kerry, can you hear me?
Hello?
Kerry, can you hear me?
Did we get cut off?
I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I asked you if when you were in New Orleans in February in 1961, did you hear of Lee Oswald at that time, or did you know anyone that knew him?
No, I hadn't. In fact, until the assassination, I had no idea he'd ever been in New Orleans. He'd been there that summer of 63, a few years later, when I'd been out to California, and there'd been an overlap of a couple of weeks, and we'd both been there together. District Attorney Jim Garrison has always been convinced that Oswald and I met with one another in New Orleans. but that's a hypothesis, very wide of the actual facts.
Okay, Kerry, I'd like to talk a little bit about your experiences with Garrison in just a minute, but before we get to that, I want to kind of delve into your memory a little bit and get some more impressions, some more of your impressions of Lee Oswald, particularly why you were suspicious that Oswald's announced intention to defect was not what it really was.
I didn't become suspicious until many years later when I began reading the material about Oswald in the writings of the War and Report critics, and I've become convinced since then that he was military intelligence, and that he was probably working for the CIA when he went to Russia. I think Carl Oglesby perhaps makes the most interesting and compelling case for that. Also, Anthony Summers in Conspiracy makes a very good case for the same thing. Among other things, he wrote a letter to the Soviet Union at one point that Sylvia Meagher quotes in her work, where he says that he's done intelligence work before and is offering his services to them or something.
Yeah. So the premise of the Idle Warriors is that that Oswald defected because of the malaise in post-war Japan?
Yeah, just because of the lousy morale situation overseas, which was actually it was a very rebellious outfit, Marine Air Control Squadron 1. They broke it up and sent it back to the States on paper and divided us up and sent us into a bunch of other outfits over there because we were so hard to handle. It had been the same outfit with a few guys going into it and a few guys leaving it every month since World War II, and it still had a very salty wartime personality. We didn't salute officers, and the enlisted men pretty much ran the outfit. They did. It was something like PFC, Winogreen, and Catch-22. When he didn't like an order, he changed it because he was in charge of the mimeograph machine. It was almost like that.
And so Oswald's character seemed very comfortable in that kind of situation. He was that type of person.
Yeah, and Oswald behaved the same way that most people behaved in Marine Air Control Squadron 1. When he got back to the States, he was behaving the same way that most of them behaved overseas, and it didn't work in the States because there just wasn't all that support for it among the other enlisted men. They weren't that organized or that capable of resisting authority in the States. And so he got himself into a lot of trouble for that reason alone, just because he maintained the same attitude that he'd had overseas, and it was very acceptable in the outfit overseas. So we could get away with it there for some reason. We couldn't in the States.
So this view that is kind of put forth in Idle Warriors is one that you maintained really even after the assassination. It was only in periods after that, when you started reading the critics, that you started to rethink it.
I didn't become a critic of the War and Report myself until 1965. And so I wrote a book about Oswald after the assassination, a non-fiction book, or one that I imagined was non-fiction at the time.
That's the book Oswald?
Yeah.
And there were 8 pages or so of Idle Warriors in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that pretty much the same view as I presented in the novel, that basically it was a psychological matter that had caused him to defect, and then I assumed to kill the president at the time. And I think I was just all wet on that entirely. I think he was probably a CIA agent spying on the FBI for Kennedy, at the time of the assassination. I think that's probably why they set him up.
Do you think that any of his behavior would be the result of any type of experiment or anything that was done in regards maybe to MK Ultra, anything similar to that that would be done with people that were in the service
Well,
at that
I'll
time.
tell you something, and I hate to talk about this because it causes a lot of people to think I'm crazy, but when I was in the service with him at that same time, I began experiencing audio hallucinations in borderline area between sleeping and waking as I was going to sleep at night. And I'm absolutely certain it was mind control. There's no doubt in my mind that it was mind control. That they had planted an electrode in the base of my skull and were mind controlling me.
Now, do you think that maybe they were doing the same thing with Oswald?
Yeah, I think it's very probable.
You know, one of the interesting things about your novel, Kerry, is that you have a character in there named Mike, who is a close friend of Johnny Shellburn, the Oswald character, but who also is regarded as a twin, almost a twin.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate coincidence. I'd forgotten all about that until I read the novel again recently. Yeah, that may have given rise to the theories that I'm the second. It was the second Oswald, and so on and so forth. Actually, my understanding is that Gordon Novell's wife told Dick Garrison's grand jury that Gordon Novell and William Seymour were the second Oswalds. Whoever it was, in my opinion, was planting proof of conspiracy. Because after the Oswald became famous, these impersonations made it obvious that there was a conspiracy. So I think it's a compliment that Garrison and some other critics should assume that I was one of the second Oswalds. However, it isn't true. I think whoever it was, though, was trying to prove that was trying to leave evidence rather than trying to cover something up.
Let's talk about Jim Garrison.
All right.
He charged you with perjury over the novel?
Yeah. Well, not over the novel. There was a woman in New Orleans who swore up and down that she saw me and Oswald sitting together in the Bourbon House in New Orleans one afternoon. And I remembered the incident. I remembered the afternoon. I remembered everything except who I was sitting with, and I could not for the life of me remember who it was. I remembered since then it was a man named Glenn. He was a country and western singer type, and he was from Texas. And the thing was, he was talking about going back to Texas. And Barbara Reed, this woman, was sitting at the bar, and she overheard that snatch of the conversation. So when Oswald appeared on television and they were talking about how he was from Texas and all that, she decided that had been Oswald that I'd been sitting with. And so that was what I denied, and was charged with perjury, denying that I'd seen Oswald in New Orleans in 1963. As I say, I wasn't even aware that he was there until the assassination, until it was brought up. Even though he'd been in the newspapers, I'd been in California at that time when he was passing out the leaflets on Canal Street and all that.
But Garrison didn't believe in the authenticity of your book, right? Did he?
I don't know if he ever even read the book. David Lifton's theory is that he read the book, and on the basis of the book decided that I was guilty. I don't believe he read my Warren Commission testimony, much less the book, as he misquotes it and misrepresents it constantly in his writings.
What do you think about this Oliver Stone movie and all of the attention that Garrison gets?
I went out to see Oliver Stone. They paid my way out to California and put me up in a Holiday Inn for a couple of days and spent a couple hours talking to me. And I think Stone's going off on a tangent myself. He was very skeptical of what I had to say about not seeing Oswald in New Orleans in 1963. His mind is very much up the same tree that Garrison's is, in my opinion. But John Stockwell was there also, a former renegade CIA agent. He believed me. He understood when I got into all the weird stuff, and there are such weird things going on in the intelligence community that most people wouldn't believe them, and I wouldn't blame them. The mind control is just one example.
So
stuff like that.
Oliver Stone had you and
somebody who's intelligence community professional realizes that stuff like that goes on.
Oliver Stone actually flew you in.
Stone himself was very skeptical,
but he had
I felt
you
like
there.
I didn't get through to him.
Yeah, you were there, and John Stockwell were there together.
Still there?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Hello, Kerry.
Hello.
He's talking to someone else, Ken.
Okay.
Oh, all right, there we go.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So we were talking about Oliver Stone apparently flew you in and flew John Stockwell in together?
Yeah, we were both there at the same time, yeah.
And was he skeptical of what Stockwell had to say about CIA operations also?
I don't think he was skeptical of Stockwell. I don't know, you know. I spoke to Stockwell, and I went out and had a couple of drinks together after the interview. And Stockwell believed me. There was no problem at all with credibility as far as he was concerned, but Stone was skeptical. Stone was convinced that I must have seen Oswald in New Orleans in 1963, and I can see why people would think that I had. But you know, I told him at one point I wish I had, so that I could say that I had, so they'd believe everything else I was telling them. That was the stumbling block.
Well, Kerry, I think this is as good a time as any to get into some of the more, I guess, oddball theories that I've heard attributed to you. And
all right, yeah.
Could we go back to the mind control one, Ken?
Yeah.
Actually, let's back up and go to that.
That's the one I wanted to go.
By the way, occasionally succumbed to what is known as the assassination crazy. And I'd be the first to admit it, you know. I have gone off on tangents.
But I think you make a good point. I talked to John Stockwell a little bit when he was here in St. Louis, Kerry, and I think you make a good point in saying that people that aren't well-versed or have not researched intelligence operations and mode of operation would think some of this is really crackpot stuff, but it's very real stuff, and MK Ultra should have opened some eyes. And Operation Paperclip should have opened some eyes, but
that stuff only scratches the surface. Though. They've had far more sophisticated stuff, and who they are, I don't know. You know. But somebody in the intelligence community, and the CIA denies that it's them. Has had far more, had the stuff that they claim they're just developing at this time, have had it since the 50s. Somebody's been able to minutely mind control people. To an extent of influencing their choices of words and so on and so forth.
How would that electrode implant actually take place? Would that have to be a surgical incision?
Well, I developed, the reason I think there was an implant is because I developed a boil on the back of my neck, right in the center of my neck, right at the base of my skull. And I spent a lot of time in New Orleans talking to a guy who I realize in retrospect was connected with the intelligence community, that I believe probably was involved in the assassination. He wasn't Oswald, however. He was another guy. I think he may have been Howard Hunt. Whoever he was, he had a bald head. Other than that, he looked like Hunt. That guy mentioned the business about the implants at the base of the skull.
And that would not have been David Ferry.
It wasn't David Ferry. I met David Ferry. It wasn't him. I met him at a party one night. I was introduced to him. I didn't realize that when I testified. When I read Harold Weisberg's book later on, I noticed that David Ferry lived on Louisiana Avenue, and that reminded me that I attended a party on Louisiana Avenue. I did meet David Ferry. We just shook hands, however. This guy was not David Ferry.
So I didn't mean to interrupt you, so go ahead. You're telling me that you met a person in New Orleans.
I talked with a man about assassinating Kennedy for about 3 years in New Orleans, from right after the Bay of Pigs invasion until 2 weeks before the assassination. In fact, he asked me he was talking about who to frame for it, and I said, why don't you frame some communists?
Yeah.
And he smirked, and I didn't realize why he was smirking at the time. Basically, I don't think they were pumping me for ideas about the assassination. I think they were setting me up to frame somebody, because he was using somebody else's name other than his own.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the idea was that I would go up before the Warren Commission and I would say that I talked to this guy about assassinating Kennedy in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that didn't work was because I didn't believe in conspiracy theories in those days. So I didn't realize that I'd been part of a conspiracy. You know, it's like, to me, conspiracies just didn't exist. That was something Birchers believed in, as far as I was concerned at the time.
And what name was this person going by when you...
Gary Kirsten was the name he was using. He left trails of evidence that he might be somebody else, to 2 or 3 mutually exclusive trails of evidence. One of them that he might be a mad scientist named Tom Mitt, who had been one of Hitler's scientists, and another one that he might be Mortimer Bloomfield of the Permindex Corporation. I don't think he was any of the above, though. I think he probably was Howard Hunt. Watergate was what convinced me of the relevance of these conversations with this man. Up until then, I didn't even think they were relevant.
Does the name Robert Stowe come into play there? Did you know that?
What's the last name?
Robert Stowe, S-T-O-W-E, in Army Intelligence. Was he a person?
Unless I met him the same night I met David Ferry, we went over to a party at the Wagasback's house, a rather well-to-do family in New Orleans. That I understand are involved in conspiracy politics. I've heard rumors that they are anyway. In what way, I don't know. There was a guy there, and I don't know why that name seemed to ring a bell. Anyway, there was some 1912 Overture was his favorite. And that type of very military type of guy. But I don't know that his name was Robert Stowe.
So is the local guy, Phil?
Right. He's a person that was real active here in St. Louis in different poetry and art presentations, and I got to know him. And I knew that he had worked in Army Intelligence in the 50s, and in a short conversation one evening, he mentioned that he had met Lee Oswald in New Orleans.
Oh, yeah?
And I never got a chance to examine the subject because he died under kind of mysterious circumstances right here in St. Louis. But he had a long career in Army Intelligence.
Yeah, well, I doubt if I've ever met him. That is the one occasion where I might have. And that somebody that I would suspect was probably Army Intelligence was on that occasion.
Kerry, are you familiar with a new book just out called Conspiracies, Cover-Ups, and Crimes by Jonathan Vankin?
Yeah, I haven't read it yet. I've been in contact with him for quite some time.
Okay, well, he mentions in there...
he's planning... You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
He's planning to write a book on me. He thinks he hasn't decided entirely to go ahead with it yet.
Oh, well, that's fabulous.
He is researching for it.
Well, his chapter on you in there, he mentions this concept...
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Hello?
Kerry?
Ron?
Kerry?
What am I supposed to do when this cuts off? I don't know why that keeps cutting off, but...
Okay, we can hear you.
All right, good.
Can you hear me, Kerry? Yeah. In Vankin's book, he mentions a little bit about this idea that you have that both you and Oswald might have been part of a Nazi breeding experiment.
Yeah, that's my theory. That's the theory I came up with in the last few years. As a result, I've developed a way of communicating with, I guess it's the intelligence community. I don't know, it's people who know quite a bit about what's going on in my life and in the present and the past, basically through codes and so on and so forth, what they call cant languages. And it's been indicated to me that I am the son of... Now, I don't know whether this is true or not. It could be a cover story, but I have been told that I am the son of Admiral Donitz, and that this is one of the reasons I've been getting all this attention over the years. And my theory is that both Oswald, and they refer to Oswald as my brother, and your brother is somebody who comes from a breeding experiment also. I've heard him many times referred to as my brother in cant language.
Mm-hmm.
So my suspicion is that all this, I thought it all started when I met Oswald in the Marines, and the more I've investigated it, and the more I've tried to piece it together, the more I've realized it had to have started earlier than that. And there are numerous reasons why I think I'm the product of a breeding experiment. And my mother's family name is Switzer, and that's the name that goes clear back to the Crusades, as does the name Oswald. And so I figure we were probably both, they weed people out in the breeding experiments. They pick two of them, and they kill one of them. You know, they decide between, they pick two of them, and they observe them for a number of years, and then they get rid of one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think they were doing with me and Oswald.
How widespread was that program? How many people were involved in that?
I don't know. I've read as much as I could on it that I've been able to find that's in the Atlanta library here anyway. I read a couple of books on it, and nobody seems to know, you know. However, it was widespread. A lot of it was directed out of Havana when Batista was in power, and his predecessors, I guess. A lot of it evidently fell into Castro's hands when he came to power, and what happened to it then, I don't know. But I'm certain that my family was involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt about it to me. However, I'm not certain that I am the son of Admiral Donuts. That's just something I heard.
Is there any particular incident or experiences in your boyhood or anything that gives you some reason to believe that?
Well, there were things my mother said over and over all the time. 5 or 6 things that didn't make any sense to me at all. That she said them over and over, and one of them is when they pick children, when they put children up for adoption, they try to find parents that physically resemble the natural parents. There were a lot of things like that. Another one was it wouldn't have been so bad if Japan had won the war. We'd all just simply be eating with chopsticks and celebrating our birthdays on the same day on the Emperor's birthday once a year, and the other thing. It wouldn't be much different if they'd won, that type of attitude. And I think they were probably deeply involved in all that stuff. They also had 2 pieces of property, real estate. They had a rental court and a residential house when I was very young, and my dad had been a delivery boy for a photo engraving company up until then. My mother's family wasn't well-to-do, and my dad's family was practically poverty-stricken. And I don't understand where I have heard that they give you, if you take a child in a breeding experiment, the custom was that they would give you the deed to a house. And they had these, they own these outright, these 2 pieces of property. And I have never asked them how they acquired that property. We had a friend whose name was Herman von Uth, who was German. And he was almost like my godfather. And we used to go over to his house, and he used to take lots of pictures of me. You know? And used to buy me all these great toys and all this type of stuff.
Are your parents still alive, Kerry?
Yeah, they live in California. Yeah.
So a lot of this could be documented, like the ownership of the house. They're probably documented.
Yeah, I get the feeling that they would like to tell me more than they can. You know, I feel like they probably are not free to tell me as much as they would if they could. You know.
Did you grow up in the United States? You spent your boyhood in?
Yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles.
What were you doing right before you joined the Marines?
Going to the University of Southern California. I went there for 1 year, and basically couldn't afford to go back the next year, and I'd already signed up in the reserve for a 2-year active duty stint at some point or other. So I decided to go ahead and get it over with.
You served your full term in the Marines?
Yeah, back then you could serve 2 years on active duty.
And what did you do when you got out? To continue
Went to New Orleans.
And trying to get the book published?
Well, tried a little to get it published. I don't remember how many times I sent it out. I certainly have never been very persistent or aggressive about marketing books. However, I sent it out, I'm sure, to at least about 5 different publishers. And nobody was interested in it. So.
Okay, well, I'd like to get into a little bit more of your career.
Absorbs any opposition, you know.
I understand, right?
Yeah.
Right. So early in the conversation, Kerry, you said, and when your quote was, and when I talk about they, I'm not even sure who they are.
Yeah.
But it is documented that there definitely was some type of alliance between the Nazis and the CIA after World War II,
yeah.
and that the Nazis shared their knowledge of mind control with the CIA.
Yeah.
And that would be an ongoing thing that continues until this day, correct?
Yes. These days it's probably the NSA more than the CIA, because they've taken over most of the CIA's functions.
But I mean that same knowledge and that same input would be there.
Yeah.
That started early on.
Yeah, it was the Nazis that first developed mind control, which a lot of people do not keep in mind, and should, because and probably the Japanese did a lot with it also, because they're pretty up on electronics. Anyhow.
Yeah. So, and when you mentioned the term Manchurian Candidate too, then so that would, do you see possibly that the Sirhan connection, or the
no doubt.
Mark Chapman with John Lennon?
As far as I don't know about David Mark Chapman, but in the case of Sirhan, I think it's been proven that he was brainwashed. Not only that, he makes a number of statements himself. Like he went to Bob's Big Boy that night, and when he left, he said he felt like he was under some mysterious control. From then until he went to the Ambassador Hotel, he felt like he was being directed some way.
Right.
And and then somebody hypnotized him at one point. Some psychiatrist hypnotized him, and found that he had been programmed. That they could make him climb the bars of his cell, and this, that, and the other thing, by giving him the appropriate orders.
Right. And then I guess too, you some of your research has. You realize that there are definite theories that the shots were fired by that security agent that was standing to the right of Kennedy. That I believe his name was Cesar. Are you familiar with?
I'm not familiar with that. I am aware that the shots couldn't have been fired from where Sirhan was standing.
Right. So and also with these same theories in mind, but you have not researched the Mark David Chapman angle, or you don't have any opinion.
A weird thing happened to me the same night that Mark David Chapman was killed John Lennon. I was attending a metaphysical lecture at a metaphysical church in Tampa, where the guy was explaining in cant language, I believed. He was talking about the Westinghouse Corporation and how they were that they were Marxist-Leninists. And John, as I understand it, it means that which is left after the enemy has conquered, something to that respect. And so John Lennon he shot that same night. I don't know, that maybe, but it seemed to me like there was some symbolism involved there.
Kerry?
Yeah.
I'm back again.
Yeah.
What kind of... I want to talk about Zenarchy a little bit. There's a lot of really great philosophical stuff in there, really funny stuff and wise stuff. Let me ask you what you think is our best defense against things like mind control and government conspiracy.
I don't think there is the best defense, in my opinion, against mind control, and this is something everybody thinks I'm a nut about. I think the best defense is to abolish the absentee control of property, because I think it's absentee control of production that makes mind control a profitable thing to research and to finance. If people did not, if it was, say, a Proudhonian economic system, or an anarchist society or whatever, I don't think there would be much profit in mind control. There wouldn't be much reason for one person to want to control another person. However, I don't think there's any direct defense against it whatsoever. I think there's a brighter side to it, which is, in a way of looking at it anyway, and that is someday there might not be any more violence because mind control might replace violence entirely. However,
some option.
I've given up on any idea of absolutely abolishing mind control. I think it can be made less profitable, and I think it can be reduced, but I don't think it can be eradicated any more than nuclear weaponry can be eradicated. I think it's an equally hopeless task.
Obviously, you feel that major portions of your life have resulted from mind control of some sort or another.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not as if your whole life has been one being led around blindfolded by some. Well, you've done writing, you published and things.
I harbored the conceit up until I discovered I was a mind control subject that I was a particularly independent thinker, and so it's been it was rather came to me rather hard to realize that I owed much of my thinking and much of my independence. What looked like to me like my independence was actually not independence at all. However, I gradually became convinced that a good portion of, like I say, I probably would have been an elder in the Mormon Church if I hadn't become a mind control subject. So it probably would have been a most perfectly boring life you could imagine.
So you've been saved by mind control.
Yeah, right. Well, not that I think it's. Believe me, it's not a nice thing. It's a hideous thing for your identity to be stolen from you. Right. But I think what identity was there to begin with, I was just in my particular case. So I got very low grades in school up until the 7th grade, and then I started getting very high grades. And I think that from what I understand, my particular background was a heredity versus environment experiment. And I think it was the hereditary side that decided to cheat a little and mind control me, because I was getting such poor grades in school and seemed so stupid that they wanted to. I'm not certain that that's what happened, but I suspect it was something like that.
Kerry, what kind of things do you do today? Are you still writing?
Yeah, I write a little. I just developed my kidneys stopped functioning earlier this summer, and I spent most of the summer in and out of the hospital. And now they want me on disability and this, that, and the other thing. So I'm going to be living, I guess, on disability and food stamps for the rest of my life. I'm being forced into early retirement. Of course, I have a conspiracy theory about what happened to my kidneys. The doctors never could figure out what it was. But that's neither here nor there. I don't know if it's true or not. It's just.
Can you summarize?
So I'll probably be writing even more in the future. I have to go to dialysis 3 times a week and all that. But it's like, so I'll have lots of time to write anyway, if nothing else. I usually, most people who say they would like to write books and so on and so forth, I have about 5 or 6 books sitting around all together, a couple of manuscripts still sitting around and collecting dust. And the thing is, if you write a page a day,
you write one page a day, or one page every other day, you're surprised at how rapidly they accumulate, how soon you have a book, you know. People don't realize, in a way, how I think Winston Churchill wrote 15 minutes a day or something, and he wrote volumes. It doesn't take a whole lot of time to write. If you're writing something such as a book, where you know, it doesn't have to meet with some editor's requirements by a certain deadline, and so on and so forth. And so I still write, but I don't feel like that's the dominant influence in my life by any means.
What would be the dominant influence?
Well, I don't know. I was washing dishes for a living. And Camden and I have always disagreed about this. Camden Benares thinks being a writer is the highest calling there is. And in 1972, I got into radical therapy, and I decided that I didn't want to be defined in terms of an economic function. And even though I'd been writing for a living at that time only for about a year once in my life, nevertheless, I didn't want to call myself a writer. And he felt personally betrayed by that. That to me, it's just another. In fact, in a way, it's a racket because of the copyright laws. Mark Twain, you know, when he went up before Congress to give a speech once, he said, "You and I are in the same business. Neither one of us works for a living." We can make enormous amounts of money writing that I don't think is all that earned, you know. But be that as it may. So I don't know, I was thinking of myself as my main function was I was a dishwasher in a Mexican restaurant. And I made a Zen discipline out of washing dishes. I sat there and tried to concentrate on washing the dishes and thinking about nothing else as I was washing the dishes. And I took as much pride in being a dishwasher as I take in being a writer when I'm writing something. And I think, to me, that's a lot more... that's my idea of being a lot more in touch with reality. It isn't, as I say, it isn't Camden's. I don't know how Wilson or Greg feel about such things. Greg stopped writing entirely at some point. Wilson's been by far the most successful of us. He's written so much that I haven't had time to read but a fraction of it myself.
Well, Phil, we're pretty much halfway through the second reel. I think we're going to have to wrap it up. I want you to, if you have any other questions, let's...
Well, nothing occurs to me right now. I mean, I'd like to digest, you know, what we've talked about, and it's really been fascinating, and I really thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Kerry, it's been a great pleasure. We'll get this out and over the air, and I'll send you, should I just send you a copy through Illuminate Press, or?
All right, yeah, that'd be fine. Or my address is Box 54.